Hello and welcome everyone to our weekly session titled Latest in Bitcoin Tech, where we go through the weekly Bitcoin Optech newsletter. And this week we will go through newsletter number 341, published on 14th of February 2025. We will read the preface before we dive into the newsletter. This week's newsletter summarizes continued discussion about probabilistic payments, describes additional opinions about ephemeral anchor scripts for Ellen, relays statistics about evictions from the Bitcoin Core orphan pool, and announces an updated draft for a revised BIP process. Also included are our regular sections summarizing our Bitcoin Core peer review club meeting, announcing new releases and release candidates, and describing notable changes to popular Bitcoin infrastructure software. All right, so there are two news articles which comprise of the gist of the news section. Both of them are continuation of news articles that were covered last week. One is the continuation of the operand emulation news article that was mentioned in last week's newsletter 340, and the other is a continuation of the ephemeral anchor script for Ellen. And ironically, last week we did not cover both of these news articles because last week's newsletter was pretty mammoth in size, so we had to pick and choose, and we gave up these two news articles. So now we have an opportunity to go back and kind of recap what these proposals were, and then continue there onwards. So we'll first read what was mentioned in newsletter 340, that is last week. So emulating operand. Operand is basically a proposed opcode, and as the name suggests, to induce randomness on Bitcoin script. Alexander Kurbatov posted to Delving Bitcoin about an interactive protocol that allows two parties to make a contract that will pay out in a way that neither can predict, which is functionally equivalent to randomly. Previous work on probabilistic payments in Bitcoin has used advanced scripts, but Kurbatov's approach uses specially constructed public keys that allow the winner to spend the contracted funds. This is more private and may allow greater flexibility. Optech was unable to fully analyze the protocol, but we didn't spot any obvious problems. We hope to see additional discussion of the idea. Probabilistic payments have multiple applications, including allowing users to send amounts on chain that would otherwise be uneconomical, such as for trimmed HTLCs. Uh, so basically, we know that Bitcoin scripts, how they work is in a deterministic manner. The Bitcoin script works in an adiabatic environment such that it does not have access to any information outside what is provided on the stack for execution. It has no access to the mempool, it has no access to the blockchain, it has no access to any external data. Only the data that you execute on the stack is the data that the script is aware of. And that is why optimizing or making changes to Bitcoin's scripting language such that it is able to detect randomness or external data will require a soft fork and introduction of a proposed opcode called operand. So this proposal has been made to induce randomness in Bitcoin without undergoing a soft fork, without incorporating the proposed opcode. And now the gist of this proposal is that two people should be able to commit to something, and the one who wins that commitment gets the reward. So basically, if I had to give an example, it would be like a thimbles game. I don't know if you all know what a thimbles game is, right? So it's basically like you have two cups and you have a ball inside one cup. So you keep two cups and there's a ball. There's a small ball inside one of the cups, right? And you challenge someone to guess the ball is in which cup. If they guess the right cup, they get a reward, and if they guess the wrong cup, then they have to pay you. And that's what a thimbles game is. So this proposal is something of that sort that two people can park their funds in a two of two multisig account, right? And they can commit to the occurrence of an event. If the event occurs, not the event, in fact, and they commit to rightly guessing a value, right? The challenger commits to rightly guessing a value, and if the challenger is able to rightly guess the value, then the challenger gets rewarded. If the challenger is not able to rightly guess the value, then the counterparty is rewarded. We read the post to better understand it. So the author says we propose a method of emulation of operand opcode on Bitcoin through a trustless interactive game between transaction counterparties. The game result is probabilistic and doesn't allow any party to cheat and increase their chance to win on any protocol step. The protocol can be organized in a way unrecognizable to any external party and doesn't require some specific scripts or Bitcoin protocol updates, right? So this proposal does not require any specific kind of a script, nor is it tied to a soft fork or a protocol update. So when transactions associated with this specific proposal are broadcasted and confirmed on the blockchain, there is no avenue to distinguish whether it's a regular Bitcoin transaction or it is a transaction that is emulating operand. We will show how the protocol works on the simple thimbles game and provide some initial thoughts about approaches and applications that can use the mentioned approach. All right, so let's try and understand what the proposal is. Somebody has unmuted themselves. Please mute yourself, all the attendees. Thank you so much. So, all right, fine. What the proposal is, Bitcoin script doesn't directly allow putting randomness in constructing the spending flow based on that, right? Bitcoin scripts are deterministic. You have to provide them all the information beforehand, and they're only aware about that information which is on their execution stack. They do not have access to external data, right? So, realizing the flow, Alice and Bob put 5 BTC each, and Bob takes everything if the coin comes up tails wasn't possible upon the following assumptions, right? Because this event, the coin being a head or a tail is an external event. It happens outside the Bitcoin ecosystem. The script cannot be made aware of this, right? Either you beforehand inform the script that the coin will be a head or a tail, but if the script execution depends upon the outcome of this coin, then there is no mechanism uh, in the current Bitcoin scripting language to incorporate such behavior because it does not have access to external information and it behaves in a deterministic manner. Why does that happen? The transaction can't derive or take randomness from somewhere at the moment of confirmation. Bitcoin script can't inspect the block, past or future transactions. Each party can receive the same stack state after each opcode processing. We can't control the ECDSA or Schnorr signature determinism. Bitcoin doesn't support operand opcode. All the limitations mentioned led to the situation where we couldn't find trustless solutions that allow scrambling randomness and use it for a trustless protocol operating with Bitcoins. We propose a way to organize it via a two-party interactive protocol and show how these properties can be applied in the example of a thimbles game that takes bids in BTC. All right. So we'll not go into the mathematics and the cryptography. We'll just try and understand the proposal at a higher level due to time constraints. Sorry, an example of thimbles game, right? Finally, we can show how the interactive protocol we introduced allows the organization of a trustless thimbles game between two counterparties. So having Alice and Bob, the game could be described as follows, right? Alice and Bob lock their coins. All right. So how does this protocol work in practice? Okay, we assume that there are two people that are participating in this protocol. One is Alice, the other is Bob. Both of them lock their coins, and we're all aware of this mechanism. We do this at multiple places in Bitcoin. All right, like an example I can give you of is a two of two multi-signature account. So Alice and Bob come together and they park their coins or they lock their coins in a two of two multi-sig account. Alice generates two values and selects one of them, doesn't reveal the selected value to Bob. Okay, so Alice generates two values, okay, and she shares both of those values with everyone. Okay, this information is not private. Alice generates two values and makes it public. She makes it public which two values she has selected, right? So in first step, Alice and Bob have both parked their funds in a two of two multi-sig account, let's say. Okay, if Alice wins, Alice gets the entire funds, meaning Bob's share as well. And if Bob wins, then Bob gets the entire funds, meaning Alice's share as well. Now, the second step is Alice generates two values and selects one of them, right? So Alice generates two values. Now, these two values that Alice has generated is public information. Out of these two values, Alice selects one. Now, this is discrete information. So Alice reveals these two values with to everyone, but she selects one of these two values. This is public. This is discrete and private information, right? For instance, Alice will in a thimbles game, you have a ball in two cups, right? Now you inform everyone that there is a ball in these two cups, right? That is public information. But you do not inform the challenger that the ball is in which of those two cups. So like that, Alice generates two values and makes that public information, selects one out of those two values and keeps it discrete. In other words, Alice chooses a thimble with a ball under it. Bob selects the thimble, right? So Bob has to guess which cup the ball is in. We are creating an analogy between this proposal and the thimble game. Takes value from proposed, takes value proposed by Alice and also doesn't reveal it, right? So Bob will take a guess. Bob will take a guess of which value Alice has chosen. Meaning, if we go back to the thimbles analogy, Bob has to guess which cup the ball is under, and Bob will not reveal that information. Alice reveals the value she selected initially, meaning Alice, the discrete value that Alice hid, she reveals it. So the ball, which was under which cup, Alice reveals that. If Bob selected the same value, he can take all deposited coins. If not, Alice can spend coins up to lock time, right? Going back to the thimbles analogy, what's a thimbles game? A thimbles game is a game where you hide a ball under one of two cups, right? You take two cups and you hide a small ball in the under one of those two cups, right? And you don't reveal the information pertaining the fact that ball is under which cup. And there's a challenger. The challenger has to guess that the ball is under which cup. And if the challenger guesses it right, then the challenger wins. And if the challenger guesses it wrong, then the initiator wins, right? So it is something similar to that, right? Alice and Bob lock their funds in a two of two multi account. Let's say Alice generates two values which are equivalent to two cups, and then she makes that information public. Then out of those two values, she selects one value and keeps it discrete. She keeps it private, right? Just like the person who hides the ball under the cup keeps that information discrete. And then Bob has to guess the value that Alice has chosen out of the two values which she publicly revealed. Meaning Bob has to guess the cup under which the ball is. And if Bob is able to guess that value, that discrete value which Alice has chosen rightly, then Bob gets all the funds which were locked, meaning the coins that were locked by Alice and Bob. Bob gets all of those coins. And if Bob is not able to answer properly, then Alice gets all of those coins. Right? So this is without going too much into detail. So this I believe is a random number that we're generating, right? And out of that random number, you're multiplying it with the generator point. I will just try and zoom it a little if I can. Okay, so this is a random number that Alice generates. Then Alice multiplies that random number with a generator point performing scalar multiplication. And this is the public information. She reveals this publicly, right? And and then she takes these two values and then she multiplies it with the generator point A1 and A2, right? And she chooses one of them and she does not reveal which one of the two she has chosen. So this is what the proposal is all about. That Alice and Bob will come together and park their funds in a two of two multi-sig account. Alice will select a random number, create a public key associated with that random number, commit to it and broadcast it, meaning announce it. And then she will create another public key and she will uh, announce it. And then and then she will discretely choose one of those two values. And Bob has to guess which value that is. If Bob guesses the value correctly, then Bob gets all the funds that have been locked by Alice and Bob collectively. And if Bob is not able to guess, then Alice wins Alice gets all the funds. Okay. Now, what's interesting is this dimension that was thought of by Dave Harding of how we can use this proposal to leverage value out of trimmed HTLCs on the Lightning Network, right? We know that the Lightning Network functions on HTLCs, hash time lock contracts, and we know that there is a dust value for the amount of funds that you can broadcast on the network, right? So if for instance if you have a commitment transaction that has a pending HTLC and you want to mine that commitment transaction on the mainnet, your commitment transaction of the Lightning channel on the mainnet, and if it has an HTLC which has funds associated with it below the dust level, then that is uneconomic, right? Because the fees that you will end up paying to get that transaction or that HTLC confirmed on the mainnet might be greater than the value associated with the HTLC itself. So in this situation, we have this concept of trimmed HTLCs. What are trimmed HTLCs? That dust value is given to miners, right? So let's say if you have a commitment transaction that has 5 pending HTLCs, out of those 5 pending HTLCs, 2 pending HTLCs have funds associated with them which are below the dust level, then the funds associated with those 2 HTLCs will go to the miners. That will incentivize the miner to mine the commitment transaction quickly, and also it saves you of having to pay uh, additional fee for mining an HTLC, which is uneconomic. All right. So how can this protocol be used to leverage the funds that we lose in the form of trimmed HTLCs? So Dave Harding says, thank you for publishing this exciting work. I was wondering if you think your protocol could also work for probabilistic HTLCs in the Lightning Network. Prior research into probabilistic payments by Aryabhat has looked at using them for sending payments that would be possible or that would be impossible or uneconomical to spend on chain. If the current LN uneconomical payments are sent using trimmed HTLCs, where the upstream party allocates the payment amount to the transaction fee of the off-chain commitment transaction, if the channel remains off-chain until the trimmed HTLC is resolved, the fee is reduced and the money is allocated to the downstream party. If the channel is force closed, the fee is paid to miners and one of the parties loses funds, right? So if you have funds, if Alice and Bob have a lightning channel, right, and Alice sends an HTLC to Bob, however, the value associated with that HTLC is so less that it is uneconomical and it is not feasible to get it mined on the blockchain because the fee that you will have to pay will probably be greater than the funds associated with the HTLC itself. In that situation, Bob ends up losing those funds because those funds are deemed to be trimmed HTLCs and they are given to the miners as the mining fee. So I think it would be nice to replace trimmed HTLCs with probabilistic HTLCs. For example, Alice wants to relay one Bob to SAT, right? So for example, Alice and Bob have a lightning channel. For some reason, Alice wants to send one SAT to Bob. We know this is an uneconomic HTLC. We know that this will be a trimmed HTLC because if you want to mine an HTLC in your commitment transaction that's worth nearly one SAT, then you are obviously going to end up paying more in fee than the value of that HTLC itself. So in that situation, you have no option but to give away that one sat to the miner. What if you have 100 such HTLCs, 10 such HTLCs? So every time you're losing money, right? This is uneconomical. So instead, Alice creates an output paying to Bob 10,000 sats with a 1 in 10,000 probability. If the channel stays off chain until the HTLC is resolved, Alice and Bob sign a mutual channel update transferring one sat from her to him. Only if the channel is force closed does the probabilistic payment happen. Is that possible with your scheme? All right. So without reading the entire passage and all the comments, because we won't have time to do that, all right? What the suggestion is, just in case, let's say that we have a lightning channel between Alice and Bob. Now, Alice wants to pay one sat to Bob. Now, it's obvious, as I just now explained, that HTLCs having values as low as one sat are uneconomical. So, what will happen that this will be deemed as a trimmed HTLC, and the funds associated with this HTLC will be given to the miner, and Bob will end up losing that. Bob will end up losing those funds. So what is the solution or the proposal is that we can use this above proposal that we discussed to create probabilistic HTLCs. Now, how do these probabilistic HTLCs work? There will be a probabilistic HTLC where Alice will pay 10,000 sats to Bob, right? And Alice will, let's say, uh, put a ball under 10,000 cups. Okay, going back to the thimbles analogy. So Alice has sent a one sat HTNC to Bob. Now Bob knows that he cannot get this confirmed on the mainnet. Rather, this fund will go to the miner. So what Alice does is Alice creates a probabilistic HTLC with 10,000 sats instead of one sat. Okay, and Alice puts a ball under those under 10,000 thimbles cups. Okay, this doesn't happen on the blockchain. I'm just giving an analogy, right? So Alice basically creates an HTLC where Bob and she commits to a value, and Bob has 1 in 10,000 as the probability to guess that value. Meaning Alice takes a ball and puts it under a cup, and then there are 10,000 cups on display, and Bob has to guess which cup Alice has put the ball under. Now, if Bob is able to guess the cup rightly, meaning Bob is able to guess the value that Alice is committed to out of the 10,000 values, let's say, then Bob gets 10,000 sats. And he doesn't, uh, uh, and if he's not able to guess that value, then he doesn't get it. Alice gets that one sat, right? Now, what will happen is that uh, if Bob has the probability of guessing one of making one right guess out of 10,000, then every single time that one HTLC he will not win, but at least once out of the 10,000 attempts when he wins, he'll get all 10,000 sats, right? So instead of getting one sat, one sat, one sat, one sat for 10,000 HTLCs, Bob has the probability of guessing that random value which Alice is committed to the probability is 1 in 10,000. So Bob will not get one sat for all 10,000 HTLCs, let's say, but once out of 10,000 attempts, Bob will guess it right and Bob will get 10,000 sats, meaning Bob will uh, get the funds that were associated with the uneconomic HTLCs that Bob was the beneficiary of without having to give those funds to miners in the form of trimmed HTLCs, right? So to summarize everything, the proposal basically is an analogy of a thimbles game. What's a thimbles game? A thimbles game is a game in which you have cups. Under the cups, you hide a ball, and the challenger has to guess which cup the ball is under. And if the challenger is able to guess it right, then he gets the reward, else he has to pay a penalty. Similarly, the proposal has been made here that let's assume Alice and Bob are the participants in this protocol. They will lock their funds in a two of two account, and then Alice will uh, commit to certain values and make that information public, and then she will discreetly choose one of those values which is analogous to the cup in which the ball is, and she'll keep that information discreet. Now Bob has to guess which out of those public values that Alice is committed to is she holding discreetly, and if Bob is able to guess it correctly, then Bob gets all the reward, meaning all the funds that are parked in that two of two account. And if he's not able to guess it correctly, then Alice gets all of those funds back. And how we can use this in context of the Lightning Network is that instead of having trimmed HTLCs, we can have probabilistic HTLCs, where instead of locking uneconomic funds in an HTLC, we can lock a value of, for instance, let's say 10,000 sats, and ensure that the challenger has a probability of guessing the committed value or the discrete value 1 in 10,000. So for every single HTLC which is uneconomic, the beneficiary will not be able to leverage the value, but when he gets right, he'll make up for all the times that he's guessed wrong. And this way, you will not lose your funds in the form of trimmed HTLCs and not divert them away to the miners. So that is what the proposal is all about. It's about creating a mechanism to induce randomness in Bitcoin scripts without having to incorporate a new opcode or going for a soft fork, and then using that as an avenue to get rid of or circumvent trimmed HTLCs and replace them with probabilistic HTLCs to avoid losing funds that are associated with HTLCs which are uneconomical by paying them to the miners. Right. If anybody has any questions, any observations, anything to ask, anything to speak, please go ahead and do so. Or if you want to comment in the chat as well, feel free to do so. Something in the chat. But I don't think this is related to what we talked about. Some disturbance too. Right. I hope I was able to at least broadly convey the idea to the listeners. If anybody did not get it at all, please ask me. I'll try my best to summarize it once again. Let's move on to the next news article. This again is a continuation of a proposal that was made last week. So we will read that one. We'll go to newsletter 340. I think we already have that tab open. I hope I'm audible. Did I unmute myself? Yes, I did. Right. So this is the news article that was published last week, and this week we have a continuation of it. So the title is Trade-Offs in Ephemeral Anchor Scripts. Bastian or T-Bass posted to Delving Bitcoin to ask for opinions about what ephemeral anchor script should be used as one of the outputs to truck-based LN commitment transactions as a replacement for existing anchor outputs. The script used determines who can CPFP fee bump the commitment transaction and under what can bump. He presented four options. Use a pay-to-anchor P2A script. This has a minimal on-chain size, but means that all trimmed HTLC value will probably go to miners like it presently does. Use a single participant keyed anchor. This may allow some excess trimmed HTLC value to be claimed by a participant who voluntarily accepts waiting a few dozen blocks before being able to spend the money they close out of a channel. Anyone who wants to force close a channel must wait that time anyway. However, neither party to the channel can delegate paying the fee to a third party without allowing that party to steal all of their channel funds. If both you and your counterparty compete to claim the excess value, it will likely all go to miners anyway. The third option is use a shared key anchor. This allows a recovery of excess trimmed HTLC value and allows a delegation, but anyone who receives the delegation can compete with you and your counterparty to claim the excess value. Again, in the case of competition, all excess value is likely to go to miners. Fourth option, use a dual key ancor. This allows each participant to claim excess trimmed HTLC value without having to wait for additional blocks before being able to spend. However, it does not allow delegation. The two parties to a channel can still compete with each other. All right, let's just read the post. All right, so this is what the post is. Okay, now we'll go through the post. The post is more self-explanatory, I believe, and it's not very long. In the post, I'd like to explore the various options available for the ephemeral anchor output used in future Lightning commitment transactions that use End version 3. We could go in a few different directions, and every option has a different set of trade-offs. What are ephemeral anchors? Basically, ephemeral anchors are zero value outputs. That they are zero outputs that are attached to the commitment transaction of the Lightning Network. I mean, they are attached to the commitment transaction of a Lightning channel. These are zero values. The only purpose of existence is that a child can be attached to them such that the child pays the fee. We all know that in the Lightning Network basically functions on the concept of pre-signed transactions. So every single time you update the state balance of the Lightning channel, you create a new commitment transaction. And when you create a commitment transaction, you're not certain always as to when you will broadcast that commitment transaction and what will the fee market look like when you actually broadcast that commitment transaction. And that is why it's pretty difficult to accurately predict how much fee will be required to get that commitment transaction mined on the blockchain. That is why we have this proposal of ephemeral anchors, meaning attaching zero value outputs to the commitment transaction of the Lightning channel. So when you intend to actually broadcast your commitment transaction to the network and get it mined, you can attach a child to that anchor output, and the child will bump the fee of the commitment transaction such that the transaction gets mined timely. Now we are talking specifically here about anchor outputs being of N version 3, meaning truck transactions, topologically restricted until confirmed transactions. We've talked about them in detail. Time does not permit us to talk about them in detail again. Basically, one attribute of truck transactions that is relevant to this proposal is that truck transactions can have only one unconfirmed child. An unconfirmed truck transaction can have only one unconfirmed truck child. So the ephemeral anchor output of the commitment transaction, which is unconfirmed, you can attach only one child to it in order to bump the fee, which mitigates which mitigates a griefing attack known as spinning. All right. Now let's start with a brief summary of how this ephemeral anchor output will behave in the context of Lightning channels. Ephemeral anchor and Lightning channel commitment transactions. When there are no pending dust HTLCs, the amount of the anchor will be zero sat, right? So if there are no pending dust HTLCs, the amount of the anchor will be zero. We just now discussed that. What's an ephemeral anchor or what's an anchor output? It is an output that has zero value. It has zero value. It does not have any sats associated with it. When there are no pending dust HTLCs, the amount of the anchor will be zero sat. In order to spend it to CPFP, the commitment transaction, nodes will need to add additional inputs to pay fee, right? So obviously, it has zero value associated with it, and it is also paying zero fee. Miners will not be incentivized to mine that transaction, right? And that transaction comes with, I believe, a it comes with a relative time lock. It comes with a relative time lock. So until and unless that anchor output is not mined, the other transactions that are associated with the commitment transaction, the other outputs that are associated with the commitment transaction cannot get mined as well. So in order to spend it to CPFP, the commitment transaction nodes will need to add additional inputs to pay fees, right? Because until and unless you don't get the ephemeral anchor output mined, you cannot get other outputs mined. And you cannot get the ephemeral anchor output mined because it has zero value and zero fee. So the miners will not be incentivized to mine it. So you will have to